Welcome to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to welcome Dr. Simon Craig. Thanks for joining us today, Simon.
Thanks, Kim. Lovely to meet you.
I'm really happy to meet you as well. So I usually start by sharing how we met. And I think we connected fairly early on last spring or summer on LinkedIn. And we followed each other's posts and such. And then in November, you asked me if I'd like you to send me a copy of your recently published book. You said you thought it might resonate with me. And I said that would be wonderful, and I'd bump it to the top of my stack. And I had been wanting to read it, but I had so many books I hadn't gotten around to ordering it. So I was so glad that you offered to send it. And I wanted to say that you're very humble. Not might only it resonate with me, but I think it's really amazing, and it resonates with me 100%. So then I invited you to join me and discuss it, and here we are. And I have to tell you, I even saved the packaging because I thought it was really cool that I got something from Australia. So, and here's the book. I'll hold it up. It's an awesome book. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I also, by way of introducing you, having spent over 30 years in clinical medicine as an OB/GYN and leadership roles in hospitals, Simon is now turning to focus on how to best serve patients, communities, and clinicians. This will be through the practice of coaching individuals and also aiding and guiding positive change within hospitals and other organizations. His life and work experience means that he has walked the talk and seen the reality and pressures, and also the joy that comes with helping people and forming high functioning teams. Simon says that we all want to work in an enriching environment and feel fulfilled in our lives. This is even more important for clinicians who work in stressful situations. Our hospitals and institutions can be so much more than they currently are. They can be places that we come to feel affection for, and our teammates should be respected, valued, and become friends. These initiatives are what he promotes. And today we're going to be talking about the theme of positive evolution in organizations that you believe we need. So what would you most like our audience to know about you as we begin our conversation?
About me, well, I think probably lots of your audience will be doctors, or certainly in the healthcare industry, and that's my background too, and that's what I view myself as a clinician. And the book's kind of arisen from that, and just how I've viewed my journey and how I've approached teams and building teams, and really reflecting on why some teams work and some teams don't work. And it always seemed a bit of a mystery, and you were lucky if you were in a good team and unlucky if you were in a poor team. But sometimes those poor teams and good teams were in exactly the same institution with people from the same background and the same training, and that it didn't seem clear why some would be fantastic teams to work in and others wouldn't. And if we knew the answers to those questions, obviously we should be taking those lessons and putting them into every one of our teams. And so I was wondering why I didn't know the answers to those questions, and I looked for it, and I found that really it wasn't clear if anyone knew the answers to those questions. So it needed a little bit of research. So that was what kind of drew me into writing the book about, how do we create teams? How do we lead? How do we communicate better? How do we have all of those things that make for better organizations and more enjoyable lives, really?
Right, right. Well, I think that's tremendous. And I have to show you that I ruined your book. I was like dog earing every page. If something resonates me, I would turn down the page. But I was like turning down every page. And sometimes, when you read a book, like you'll underline something. But there was so much, it got to the point where I would like draw a star and then put an arrow down the whole page. So towards the end, I gave up. And so that I did put a few tabs in here. But the other thing I had to tell you is I really appreciated your conversation with Dr. Matt Daniel. And I know you guys talked about teams and relationships, and I shared that this morning. Part of, I don't know if you're familiar with Medicine Forward, Dr. Todd Otten is part of that, and Gabe Charbonneau. And we talked this morning, and I'm actually, the next book I'm going to read is Todd had Zeev Neuwirth and Gabe on his podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with this book.
No, no, but I'll look for that. Yeah,
Okay, because I
yeah,
said, well,
yeah.
when I drop this episode, I'm going to tag all five of you because I said because the three of them did a podcast, and then I heard yours and Matt's, and I'm like, if the five of you guys were in a room together, you could probably solve all the world's problems. So I'm going to connect you.
But we might have some fun anyway.
Yeah.
That's really nice of you, Kim. And so with all those dog-eared pages, I might have to send you another copy from Australia, huh?
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
uh,
That,
I was wondering, I'm going to let you speak because again, there's so much, it would almost be overwhelming for me to know where to start. So I either was going to ask you to speak to whatever is most on your heart and mind right now in relation to this, and or if you wanted to share a story that speaks to how you've witnessed the culture of a healthcare system change in a positive way.
well, just relating to how we came together, I think, I think everyone that's probably been exposed to the way you communicate and things, you communicate in a very positive and uplifting manner, and it supports people. And we don't see enough of that in healthcare, and that's really resonated with me, the way you conduct yourself. And sometimes we can choose to behave in certain ways, can't we? And we're all busy and we're all stressed, but when we do communicate in a friendly manner, we get friendliness and positive emotion coming back at us, and that's what we need sometimes. So what we give is kind of what we receive, and I think that communication is a critical thing. And I think the evidence around the world is that healthcare is really struggling, and the systems are kind of breaking down. Certainly what I see in America, certainly in Australia, we are struggling, and the evidence is burnout, people leaving. We've got ambulances ramped up in front of every hospital. We've got emergency departments overflowing, and why is that? And what can we do about it? It doesn't seem to be just throwing money at it fixes it, because that's been tried. And I think I think it's time to reinvent these systems or rethink them, and they've worked well. They've worked for a reason, and they've really served us, particularly in the Western world. We share lots of healthcare, elements, but it might be time to rethink that. And I think a lot of the clinicians, the struggles that we're seeing with burnout, that's a relatively new phenomenon. It's not due to COVID; it was there before, but maybe we need to rethink how we train people, how we relate to people, how we communicate, and do something deliberate to improve the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that was striking, of course, reading your book and knowing that you're in Australia is how universal these problems are, right? That this could, other than the way you spell organizations, which is a little, you use an S and we use a C, but other little things like that, you wouldn't know that you were writing, right, about Australia because we share the same issues here. And one thing that I had dog-eared, was when you were speaking to when you were in medical school and that you thought, everyone else in your course knew that they belonged, and you realize now that that probably wasn't the truth. It's possible that many of us were isolated and struggling, feeling alone and without a sense of belonging, but we all pretended otherwise. And I hear that over and over again with the physicians I speak with here, that they all feel like they're alone. So that's the saddest thing, that for all these years, everybody's been walking around feeling like they're the only ones, but everybody is feeling that way. And a lot of people, I can't say
Yeah,
everyone.
yeah, that's right. And I think that goes to the sort of hidden curriculum of medicine, as it's called, which is, we've got to appear as though we're perfect, and we've got to appear invincible, and we certainly learn to suppress emotions, which is great in an emergency, but not so great for the rest of your life. And and that doesn't get unpacked generally. And so you end up suppressing emotions all the time, and that's related to burnout. There's evidence supporting that. There's lots of other elements of burnout, but some of it is just how we connect with each other and how we reflect ourselves, because a lot of this, our organizational culture becomes an unconscious way of being. We don't really examine it, and when you're in the middle of it, you don't know until you can somehow maybe get outside that, step outside, or have someone come in and say, this is not right. And I'm working in an organization at the moment with a team that's having some struggles, and there's some interpersonal conflict and things. But when you think about it and unpack this team, these things have been coming over 20 years. So this fight that happened yesterday or last week, that's been building up for years, and it's and that's what we really need to deal with. And I think the thing about it being universal and similar to the messages you're hearing in the US, well, in some ways that's really good, because it just means we're all the same as people and we're all sharing the same qualities. And then when we can find answers or things that work, we can extrapolate them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know exactly, exactly. And actually, and on the same page, what I appreciated is when you shared that you had a variety of jobs while you were in medical training, and when you talked about what you did in the residential nursing home, that you had all the messy jobs. You cleaned up and doubly incontinent residents, showered people, dressed them, brushed their false teeth, made beds, fed those who couldn't feed themselves. And you said, funnily enough, you enjoyed the work apart from mornings. Yeah, some mornings, you said it felt like honest work. And you said in the black humor of the staff, you laughed more than you did with your medical student colleagues. You felt more at home, possibly because you felt valued and part of a team.
Yeah. I think that it was it, and it was. And what is a team? And I think it was just that sort of feeling of being supported and feeling a bit of humor, and calling someone to help you lift a patient or make a bed or something like that, which in the year I went to medical school, I didn't feel that. I felt like we were more competing with each other, and I think that's not
Mhm.
an uncommon scenario in some medical schools. And I guess we were to some degree to find which jobs we could get. Once I started working in hospitals, I found exactly the same feeling that I'd had when I was working my odd jobs and my nursing home jobs during
Mhm.
medical school, that I was part of a team, and I felt great. It felt really good. And I've reflected over the years about why some jobs as a doctor felt better than others. And a lot of it comes to leadership, I think.
Mhm.
And it may not be the leader that's the genius, that's the world-renowned professor, but it's usually the leader that's pretty kind and
Mhm.
treats the junior staff really well and gets to know your name and includes you, and you know all of a sudden you're part of something, rather than having to wait for time and pay your dues and be referred to as the resident rather than by your name. So I think kindness is absolutely critical to create good teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking to those roles you had as a medical student, I think that's fantastic that you understand everything from the ground up. And I think that helped you, right? Write this book that you know it from all angles. And I remember my second job, I'm a physical therapist, and my boss, I was a relatively new physical therapist, and she had been started as a PTA. And she says, and it was kind of like you, that she knows it all for you. She's cleaned a Hubbard tank, scrubbed a Hubbard tank, right?
Yeah.
And cleaned the hot pack, they'll change the water in the hot pack. Where as physical therapists, we never had to do that because we had the aides to do it for us.
Yeah. And what you alluded to before, Kim, so I used to work that on a weekend, and sometimes I'd be out with my mates having a few drinks the night before, and I didn't feel so healthy that on the morning, and cleaning bedpans and things isn't the best job after a big night out.
Right.
And I didn't feel a lot of gratitude for needing to do that job. It was an economic need rather than,
Right.
but I'm grateful that I did it now, and I think it was a gift, to see, as you say, all the levels, and whether we're doing surgery in an ivory tower, or whether we're cleaning up after someone, all of us in healthcare, the mission is we're looking after people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Yeah. And and then speaking to when you said a good type of leader, on another page, you had shared that a leader must have a type of love for their teammates. In an outstanding team, these same feelings will be shared amongst all the performers in the group. So some people would think, love what? But I'd like you to speak to that a little, because I agree with you.
Yeah. I think it's certainly not romantic love, but it's that affection that you feel. And I think if any person really truly reflects on when they're part of a great team, you do feel a sense of gratitude, you feel connection, you feel thankful, and you do have a sense of positive regard. And whether you want to use that word love, or whether you just want to think highly of people, but it's kind of the same stuff. It's positive emotion towards someone else, and positive emotion amongst all team members. And it can't be just some team members and one of the team you don't like, or they're left out, because then it's not a true team. So I think that developing that positive emotion amongst the team is really critical, and I think you can do it. I think we all know how to connect with people. Unfortunately, doctors or physicians, as you say, we find it harder, because we become isolated and we become lonelier. It's a lonely profession, and there's a lot of pressure. But we can work on these things, and this is part of some of how we can improve health. We can build human resource, because when people are feeling good in their team and supported, they work more efficiently, more gets done, there's less mistakes, so the patients stay a shorter time in hospital. So this is actually something that costs nothing, but can improve healthcare, and it's by improving teams and culture.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And one of my earlier jobs, I was at a hospital where there was such a distinct hierarchy, and it's the only place I ever worked where it was like this, where and I was a newer physical therapist, but where the senior physical therapists were very highly regarded. So, and then we couldn't do certain things, you had to get to be a senior to like maybe be on the splinting team or something like that. And I remember when we had the weekly team meetings, the chief would go around and then should hear from all the seniors. But I was like, well, what about me? Like, I might have had an idea that I wanted to share, but I didn't feel valued really at all. You kind of felt like a peon. And I stayed for a year. I never made it to being a senior there. But then the next job I had, actually, I went back to the job I had before that, and I ended up being like the acting head of the department for a couple years until I had my son, and then I stepped away for a while. And well, like you're saying, like I tried to make everyone feel valued. Like we had an aide, and like an aide, and I tried to make her and our secretary feel as valued as the physical therapist. And like for I remember Halloween that year, we were trying to think of what to be because we could all dress up, and they suggested like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So like I was Snow White, and then they were between the secretary, the aide, and the other therapist. No matter who we were all part of the team together, and it felt like that.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of interesting stuff in that story, I think, Kim. Um, so the initial team that wasn't so nice to be part of, there was a lack of inclusion, and that weakens a team, because they're not seeing your viewpoint. You're coming into that team with you see something from a different direction, so that team's weaker without hearing those views. And it's interesting, you didn't stay long,
Mm-hmm.
because you were looking for another opportunity, and then you moved into a new job where it just felt better. And that's culture, isn't it? Sometimes you can't put your finger on it, but you just know what feels right. And if it feels right, you're happier, you stay longer, you work harder. Um, and and the final bit of your story, I think, is fantastic. That I think a sense of fun. I mean, work can be fun. We're in healthcare; it's
Mm-hmm.
serious. It's important work, but by having fun or just lightening the mood, it takes away stress and we make less mistakes. So that sort of thing's really important. And all members of your team. How poorly does any team work when the secretary's not doing her job, his or her job properly? So everyone has a role and everyone's critical. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And then another section, contemplating change. This paragraph stuck out for me. Leaps of progress do not come with a fixed mindset, feeling trapped by convention or believing that nothing can or ever will change. When we do tell ourselves change is not possible, are we voicing a belief, an assumption, or a fear? Could our negativity bias and loss aversion prevent us from exploring new outlooks, even if the present is far from satisfactory? Perhaps one factor in why a problematic healthcare culture seems permanent and unchangeable relates to our own fear. Are we too scared to contemplate a new way?
Yeah. And it is, isn't it? Change is scary for all of us. And that's why it often gets resisted. It's often spoke about cultural change in hospitals and healthcare organizations, but it often doesn't happen. And when it comes to it, everyone fears the unknown, and that's understandable, and that's got to be dealt with any change. That's something that has to be brought out and talked about. And I think what you were talking about earlier with positive evolution, any organization and any group, we are evolving. We're all changing slowly, but sometimes these poorer organizations kind of circle back to a point where they really started from. And I think rather than this sort of grand change in our organizations that we think that we take one point, we can move to a different point, it's not going to be like that. It won't be a straight line. It will be a zigzag, roundabout, loopy kind of direction. But we can guide that positive change and we will evolve. And we may not know where we're going to end, but it's going to be somewhere better than just staying still and having the same difficulties going on and on and on day after day. So I think we can guide a positive evolution, and I think that's the way we need to sort of think about it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And interestingly, this morning I participated in a Monday morning women's book study through my church, but this morning we watched a TED Talk and I didn't catch the name. I think it was the founder of the TED Talks. He did one on infectious generosity. And it was really good. And one thing he said really early on, the TED Talk is like 19 minutes long. He said, you don't need to be big to be powerful. You just need to be infectious.
Yeah,
So like
yeah, that's
infectious
great,
in a
isn't it?
good way.
Yeah, and that relates to this concept of emotional contagion, that positive emotions can filter out, and that positive person in any group, that really high quality connector that's fun and efficient, and those people are worth their weight in gold. But similarly, you can have emotional contagion when someone's quite negative, and we all have struggles, but some people seem to be overly negative, and maybe those people need to be supported and made aware of how they're affecting the group. They probably don't know, but we can use an emotional context for our teams to improve how we work.
Yeah, exactly. And we spoke to that this morning, how it can be infectious in either a positive or a negative way. Yeah. And we were like, when they
Yeah,
were saying, well, what do you do about the people that like infect hate or spread hate? And then I was like, I don't know. Do you just try to make love stronger?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it sounds like you had a good morning, and you probably walked away feeling pretty good and wanting to go back the next day. And isn't that what we all want to do with our work? We want to leave saying that was a good day. I'm keen to come back tomorrow, rather than the opposite, which unfortunately is occurring more frequently.
Right, right. And one other thing he said toward the end was take a risk, give what you can, and be amazed at what happens next.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. And maybe that risk is just going up to someone and saying, hey, I really liked the way you said that, or I really like the way you supported, or that, we don't do enough of that. We always think feedback has to be negative, and the negative feedback always gets given. The positive thoughts that you have, often we forget. We're all guilty of that. We forget to say to someone,
Mm,
hey, I really like this or that. And maybe that's something that we can do consciously. We can say, when I think something good about someone, I will just say it. And sometimes it seems weird, and sometimes you feel like
mm,
you've got to be brave to go and do it, but it
mhm.
makes that person's day, and usually they light up and you feel better afterwards as well.
You're exactly right. So I think that risk could be another word for vulnerability, right? To be willing to be a little bit vulnerable.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
that takes courage, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what he said. Those were the last three things I was going to tell you. So about this infectious generosity, he was saying three words: emotion, creativity, and courage.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think they're important, aren't they? And um, yeah, and we know as well, we're talking about positive emotion. We're talking about the need for friends. We're talking about the loneliness epidemic in our organizations. And if you've got friends and you're supported, how do you make friends? Well, you have to share, you have to support, and you're also becoming a friend with someone involves a little bit of shared vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, no, that's very, very important. And so I even like the way you ended your book. I thought that was brilliant. Did you want to read? You might not have the copy of your book, or you probably have it memorized, right?
The quote,
Yeah.
uh,
You said,
I
so
don't
I'll
have it
say
here,
what
but
you said. I said, you said my favorite and perhaps the wisest doctor. Dr. Seuss said it best.
yeah, which he often does.
Yeah, yeah. Did you want to share the quote or did you?
Uh,
If you if you don't have it
could you read it
memorized,
to
I
me?
could read it.
I don't have it word for word in my
Sure.
memory.
You said unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not.
Yeah,
And I love
yeah,
that. So that was right,
yeah,
and that's what I say is that we all have to care about each other. You'll see how I end this in a minute, right? That we all have to care about each other, and that's exactly what this speaks to. So till your very last,
yeah.
what you chose as your very last quote, I thought this is just an incredible book. So thank you very much for writing it, and I shared it with our Medicine Forward group this morning, and people were jotting down the
Oh,
title.
thank you, Kim. Yeah, care is such a important word in all of its connotations, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. So as we wind
Yeah.
down our discussion, did you have any tips for your colleagues from seasoned physicians to medical students or even those considering med school?
Yeah, I think what I've learned, and you learn the lessons through your life. I think relationships are really important, and a lot of us go to work and think our relationships are outside work, but they're really at work as well.
Mhm.
We have one life. We don't have separate parts of our lives, and I think those relationships at work, we need to cherish them and prioritize them and build them. And all of us will need support at some stage, and the amount of support we get will be directly related to how much support we've given to others. And so I think creating friends at work, whether you're a medical student, whether you're a nurse,
Mhm.
whether you whatever you do, I think it's really, really important. So look after others, and you will also feel that coming back to you.
I fully agree with that, and I've been so fortunate that pretty much every place I worked, the other therapists, not only the PTs or PTOT speeches, we did feel like a team. And there's nobody like your work friends. And I left my job a couple years ago amidst my health challenges, but they still include me when the PTs and OTs, like whenever they go out or get together, and they're like, "You'll always be one of us," and it just feels
Yeah,
really good.
yeah,
And you have those, private jokes,
yeah,
and you're in the trenches
yeah.
together. And
Yeah, and that's not an accident, Kim. That's not that. That's because your positive energy lifts others up, and you're creating that. So you're benefiting from something that you're creating as well. So I think that that's the lesson for us, isn't it? And perhaps maybe not everyone's as positive at all times, but we can always reframe things and take the best view of each other. But smiling at someone's a pretty good start.
I love that. And I think that's so you're the name of your business is PosMed, right? Is that positive medicine?
Thank you. Yes, that's right. That's right. And it is, isn't it? I mean, it's healthcare, and we have to care, and we have to care for ourselves and care for others. And it comes from things that are about being human. It's not about
Mhm.
$1 million pieces of equipment. It's about looking after people.
You're right. And I think, and we all, and until the system changes, if we care about each other, right? If the doctors care about the patients and the patients care about the doctors and the doctors care about each other, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great message that you share as well. I think that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
And on your, it says inquire, appreciate, and transform. So I love that. That's really
Thank you.
good. Okay. So how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Well, through that company that you just kindly showed the card, so posmed, posmed.com.au is the best way. And so Simon at posmed.com.au or contact@posmed will get me there. Otherwise, I met you on LinkedIn, and other people reach out on LinkedIn, which would be great. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's great. And then I'll share that link in the show notes. So I just wanted to thank you again very much for being my guest today, Simon. I was so looking forward to our conversation, and I'm really glad that we were able to find this time to talk.
Yeah, it's been great to meet you, Kim. I've watched and listened to what you do, and I'm really impressed. And thank you for what you do. It's really lovely.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you for all you're doing to help us move the needle in healthcare. So, how I usually end is I say, in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients. Patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.